giving me some time. I know that I've met a couple of you. Jamie, could I ask you to pass that to Commissioner Phillips? And handed you off a packet. I'm here to talk about a new property, Community Homes, wishes developed in North Lebanon Township. I think all of you have probably been by our proof of concept structure on Maple Street, so you have kind of a, in your minds an idea of what the property would look like. While Community Homes would be the sponsor of the project, the developer, the owner, the manager, we are working closely with Lebanon County Christian Ministries, Lebanon Rescue Ministries, Calvary Chapel here in Lebanon. And just as a side note, we've been slowly over the last couple of years taking steps to get to this day. And yesterday there was an actual closing on the land in North Lebanon Township. And that was generously provided by funds from Calvary Chapel in Lebanon. The property itself would be a total of 23 units. I'm not sure how much, and I don't know if you electronically read it. I've got 4 copies of this, which includes all the detail, the operating and the development pro forma. This is unique in that it is, to my knowledge, the first time in Lebanon County an affordable housing property is being attempted to be developed, built, occupied with totally or in the majority using private funding. Something new for Community Homes with this project is we've never been noted for doing fundraising, because in the past, way back when, you know, there was lots of money available at the federal and state levels. That just doesn't exist anymore. And so we're taking a slightly different approach to this. I trust that your technical people who asked me for this same information you have in front of you have reported to you as to their thoughts about the project. But the 23-unit project would be built out in 3 phases. The first phase we'd like to complete by 2022. We do have a federal home loan bank grant application that is due in their offices in Pittsburgh next week. But overall, some of the differences are that almost 44% of the total funds required are going to be generated through grants from the Federal Home Loan Bank. Community Homes, in turn, is mounting a 3-year capital campaign which will generate another almost 35% of the total requirement. And permanent debt, and we do have a lender who has agreed to, who is a member of the Federal Home Loan Bank, has agreed to sponsor our project into the Federal Home Loan Bank system. Over the course of the 3 phases, their permanent debt would be about 11.25% of the total need. I am here today specifically to ask you for your support via the monies in the Act 137 fund. When I sent the information over to Mr. Hoffman, I asked specifically for $500,000, and I subsequently...
Could you clarify that's Brian Hoffman?
Brian Hoffman, I'm sorry, what did I say?
You said Mr. Hoffman, but there are other Hoffmans involved in this.
Okay, Brian Hoffman, correct. And yeah, with Beers and Hoffman over there, Robert Hoffman, obviously.
He wouldn't give it to you.
No. So I'm specifically here to ask for that. But this is unique from the standpoint of there's a tremendous amount of private sourcing of the funds to do this. And it's simply the reality that we don't have places to go with any credible chance of success, either at the federal or the state level for funding of the project. The total project would be 23 units. They would all be handicapped accessible. There would be 9 two-bedroom apartments, 14 one-bedroom apartments. They will be a little bit bigger than the ones that are up on Maple Street that you can see now, and they will have an outside small storage closet. There will be an addition of a back porch as well as the front porch. North Lebanon Township has committed to or has approved our conditional use application for developing this pocket neighborhood on the parcel that we're talking about. So rather than me blithering on, one thing I want to say. I mentioned Calvary Chapel, Lebanon Rescue Mission, and Lebanon County Christian Ministries. One of the things that we talked about way back was how can we create housing that would be supportive of people and would continue to help them become more self-sufficient, would help them economically better themselves, and even went so far as talking with the Habitat for Humanity about this particular property becoming a feeder to their first-time home buyer program. My point simply is there's plans to actually provide, it's not a part of the grant or any of the funding, but each of these organizations has agreed to provide what Federal Home Loan Bank calls empowerment assistance. Those are things like case management, counseling for mental and behavioral health, job employment training programs, life skill classes, financial literacy, including budgeting, credit counseling, all to try to get them to each household to become in a stronger position than when they first come in to Canal Affordable Housing. But what I want to say, yes?
I think something missing in the equation for me, and it gave me some sticker shock when I looked at it. It's the cost per unit and also the overall cost of the project. I don't think that was mentioned yet.
It has not. Well, it gave all of us sticker shock, and part of it has been the wide volatility in construction materials cost. When we did an initial pro forma earlier this year, and then we updated it in July, we saw, for example, overall the entire project, a 20% increase in construction material cost. That was $600,000, a little bit over $600,000 in increased cost. And the utilities, tap-in fees to construct this is vacant ground, so there are no utilities on the site. That is a pretty high number as well. And it is true. We did the 2 units up on Maple Street because we owned the land, had the utilities. We did it for about $122,000 per dwelling. This is a little over $222,000 per dwelling. And the differences are raw land, no utilities, and the volatility in construction costs. So, the last pro forma I mentioned earlier this year and the one in July, we saw our costs jump by $1 million, a little over $1 million. Now, we will continue throughout this entire project to reevaluate that. We're going to do everything we can to drop that per unit cost as this project rolls out. I hope I answered your question, Commissioner.
You didn't mention the 5.1 million yet, but maybe you'll get.
Well, the 5.1 million is the total cost for all 23 units.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else on your side that you want to present, or do you want to take questions? Or
I'll be happy to answer questions. I just want to make one more point. So these 3 other nonprofits, Calvary Chapel, Lebanon Rescue Mission, and LCCM, I asked them the question, so overall, year to year, how many people in your various programs could use housing like this. And they each responded back to me, and they're telling me that their need today totals about 105 households a year. So the supply of these 23 units is less than 22% of their total need. And that's just those three organizations, let alone what's happening in the community at large. So anyway, I'll be happy to entertain questions.
My question also relates to cost, and we know that whatever the situation, change in administration, the pandemic, supply chain, all those kinds of things have contributed to ridiculous pricing in built construction materials. You know, plywood as high as $100 a sheet. Wouldn't it be prudent to wait this out and see where this, because indications are that is becoming somewhat softened with new pricing, and you know, I know it's hard. None of us have a crystal ball, but you know, I when you say that there's what 122 people that could use units like this, there's probably a lot more that could use a $222,000 home in the community. People that are living in much lesser means. So you could certainly jack that number up if you consider the practicality of this project. So it really is a concern to me to spend that kind of money, and I know it's coming from different sources, but it's exorbitant, really.
My view is that, first of all, I applaud your board for pulling these entities together. This is something that I think is, you know, very well worth mentioning, that it's rare when you get three competing in many ways for, you know, private funds, that they're working together on to solve a problem. And I think putting a dent in it such as this is a good thing. I also am happy that they're going to have skin in the game in terms of their own resources, and also being responsible for raising the funds through capital campaigns, that you'll be left with a maybe 10% portion, or 11% you said, I think, of debt at the end of this whole thing. So when I you know, distill it down to the whole thing, I'm going to support it because of all the entities involved and their commitment to making it work in spite of the cost. I'm very disappointed that, you know, these can't be done for $75,000 and you could have 3 times. You know, that's the practical or pragmatic side of this kind of a project that most people that are out there in the private sector would look at and say, yeah, that would make sense if they could be. But I've preached that before with you, and I know there are guidelines that you must follow and so on, that we get to these numbers. And I also understand in your defense that the average for these is, you know, $270 a unit. Am I far off on that? That we're actually 50,000 below what the rest of the world.
Yes, and you know, in this market, that's true. You can go over to Dauphin County and you're approaching $400,000 a unit.
Wow.
If you go to Philadelphia, add another 100,000 to that.
Wow.
Okay, so
Yeah, it's so, and that's the bureaucracy that we're involved with in these things. So yes.
When you're done, I just.
I think I'm finished for now, but thank you. Oh, and the only other thing is you came here for an ask, right?
correct.
And we didn't get to that part yet.
Well, I mentioned it. I am asking for $500,000.
Okay. I didn't hear that number.
I heard it.
There's one other thing, if I may, real quickly. I did not mention stormwater management. That certainly will impact every project that's done in the future. And in the schematics that I believe you all saw, there's a total of 6 different stormwater management elements that we have to construct in order to get it. So that doesn't help us out either. In terms of the need, and I'm going to try to answer Mr. Ames' question. 2 things. We are very aware of how many people need it there. We had a lady move into Willow Terrace this year. She lived on North 5th Street. She was paying 80% of her income for rent. Her landlord, who was out of town, did not keep the property up to good shape. What was she faced with doing? Walking out of her apartment, going down the street a couple of blocks to go into a laundromat to toilet. And she'd been doing that for months. All right. Secondly, I would just say, because you all know Jim Castle, his widow called me last week. A lady's been on our waiting list at Poplar Terrace for 3 years, and she was just checking in again. This lady's still number 26 on your waiting list. So we'll do everything we can to drive that cost down. I mean, that was the whole Community Homes Board thing. Can we do it economically so we can achieve affordable rents? I look at this with our development team on a weekly basis. We're doing the best we can. So, Mr. Ames, I want to say, yes, we could wait another year, but I don't think this issue of having decent housing for a lot of people is going to go away. I think it's going to get worse. I'm sorry to be the bearer of that kind of news.
Well, my reason for wanting to move ahead is more trying to hold this group together, and this has been in play for a couple of years already. So that's my other fear, that it's maybe getting fragile in terms of waiting another year might put some holes in the support that they think is out there for it. So there's a couple of reasons floating through my head. Commissioner Litz.
Yeah, we had Ames twice in one motion before. We don't want that again.
No, certainly not.
At any rate, try and have a little levity. Charlie, I know you for many, many years, used to be on the board for community homes, and know that you are extremely frugal and that you're a man of your word, and you've laid out that you're going to work on getting these costs down. You're kind of giving us a ceiling at the height of the cost of the different building materials. And so I heard what you said, and I know the county has very minimal risk in this. And the $500,000, it is my understanding, is a loan to you at no interest rate, and we will get that back to reinvest in a future project. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
All that being said, I would like to place a motion on the floor to move ahead with approving the $500,000 loan at no interest for community homes to proceed with this project.
And where are those funds to come from?
Act 137.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion. Painful.
We have a painful second. Yes, Jane.
Just a couple of things to mention. You did touch on one of the notable things is the stormwater on site. I think you're literally putting vaults in underneath to store the water, which is a practice these days. Is that how it's being done? Are there storage facilities, I guess, for stormwater?
Yes,
So
there'll be one in the Canal Street connector, and there'll be 3 located in the parking lot driveway areas. One is actually between phase 1 and phase 2 underground.
So that is a pretty significant expense that at one time wasn't.
Yes.
Number 2, the utilities. Oddly, if you know where this site is, I find it odd anyway that the utilities have to still be brought to this site. Yeah. It has industry on the south side and on the west side, residential on the east side, and a manufactured home park on the north side.
So we're not taking up farmland.
But here sits this vacant lot that's just never had utilities run to it. And so that is, and at some point, it's going to be developed, and that has to happen to the utility. And the last thing I just wanted to, you touched on it, but I don't know if the routing of the funds was discussed, and that's the $90,000 purchase from Calvary, or by Calvary from Habitat about 10 years ago, maybe more now, maybe 15 years ago now. The county granted from this same Act 137 funds the money to purchase that land by Habitat. They have held it for that long, and I think for some of the things I just talked about, it never materialized.
That's exactly right.
So Calvary purchased it for this project for $90,000. The proceeds of that sale are coming back into the Act 137 fund where they came from. And so, you know, it's a bit of an offsetting revenue here for this. It's the same money, you know, same project, but 90,000 from it coming back. So
410,000.
410. I hope that was, you know, you could follow that, but I just wanted to make mention. It's in an overview we have, and Charlie mentioned the purchase, but the routing of those funds are bringing them back in to be reused for this same project.
Sure. Just off the top of your head, Charlie, what are the engineering fees for this project?
The next phase of the engineering fees for the stormwater management, utilities, all those things, I have a quote from STECBEC for $35,000 to completely develop site development stormwater management plan that would be then set forth to the township and the county for review and approval, hopefully approval.
Have you had engineering fees up to this point?
Sure have.
Yeah. Excuse me for laughing, but the only thing more expensive than an attorney these days is an engineering company, so.
Yeah. Yes, we receive their bill on a monthly basis.
Could I maybe be a little more specific to your question, Commissioner Ames? The total fees, the professional fees that are coming into this cost, architect, engineering, attorney, accounting, and so on, is $840,000.
Just about $1 million.
So that may be more complete answer. And then the site work itself, which we just talked about in terms of excavation, stormwater, and so on, is $863,000. So you have, you know, $1.7 million in fees and site work before one brick is laid for the actual project construction. Expensive these days.
Laura,
Just, Act 137 is what?
Real estate.
affordable housing.
Okay.
And Jimmy can explain where that money comes from. That's a perpetual fund.
There's a portion of each item recorded in the Recorder of Deeds office that gets parceled into an affordable housing fund for the commissioner's discretion to use toward affordable housing fund projects. I think that legislation passed in '93, so it's been.
And for Charlie, so it's, you know, roughly a $5.1 million project.
Yes, ma'am.
44% coming from Federal Home Loan Bank grants. I'm no mathematician, but if I did it right, it looks like 2.856 million is what you have to raise.
1.8 million is what we will be raising through our capital campaign overall. Federal Home Loan Bank is going to provide $2,250,000.
Oh, okay. Okay. And that 1.8 million is what LCCM, Lebanon Rescue Mission, are they the ones?
No. Community Homes has its own capital campaign. It's chaired by Troy Peters from Jonestown Bank and Trust Company and David Warner from Buskin Davis. We've been very quietly getting this ready. We're now meeting every 2 weeks, but I can tell you thus far, I cannot name who the source of it is, but our largest donation thus far is $125,000. We have right now, today, $205,000 in the bank, and they're actively working to close the rest of the gap we need to do phase one.
Any other questions before we vote? Not all in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, so moved.
Thank you.
All right, Charlie. Thank you.
We'll be